Today, we're challenging one of the most difficult recipes in Delicious in Dungeon, the Man Eating Plant Tart. In episode 1, our girl flop Marcel barely avoids getting turned to fertilizer, Laios expresses an interest in plant bondage, and Senshi decides to make a fruity little tart. If we rub our two brain cells together, the tart is basically a quiche. It uses a variety of ingredients like slime, scorpion broth, and 4 different types of man-eating fruits. If we take a closer look at the fruits and their real-life equivalents, this looks like a red bell pepper, but its insides are similar to that of a potato. These ones are very similar to red and green cherry tomatoes, and this last one was a difficult one. Initially, I was thinking about using onions, but then I decided to use something else. You'll see later. Starting with the crust, in the anime, Senshi uses the bell pepper fruit skin to make a crust, and it was totally inedible. I've seen a couple people try to recreate this dish with red bell peppers, but it hasn't really worked out for them. Cooking the bell peppers in the pan introduces a lot of moisture, which is bad for pie and quiche type dishes. Plus, it'll come out looking as pretty as you from your mother's womb. So for our recreation, I want to make a pie crust that is similar in color and texture that we can actually eat. In a medium-sized mixing bowl, combine 320 grams of flour, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of paprika. The paprika will bring out that reddish color in the crust, and then mix all the ingredients up with a whisk. Next, take 2 sticks of butter still cold from the fridge and cut them into 1/2-inch size cubes. Make sure not to take the butter out too early because we want to keep the butter as cold as possible. Here, I'm scattering the cubes of butter into the flour mixture and crumbling it with my hands. It would be really helpful to keep the butter cold. I have extra hot hands, so you can see how quickly the butter melts when I'm handling it. So greasy, just like your forehead. Make sure the ingredients are well combined, but be careful not to overdo it or else the butter will fully melt. To turn this mixture into a dough, get a small bowl of ice water and sprinkle in 4 tablespoons, 1 tablespoon at a time. Mix well with a spoon until the dough comes together. You know your dough is ready when you grab some of the flour mixture, squeeze it, and it holds together, only falling apart slightly. If not, add another tablespoon of ice water and try again. Repeat this until the dough is staying together. Then using your palm, push the dough down and fold it on itself several times. This will create butter layers in the pastry so that the crumb comes out nice and flaky. Now I cut the dough in half because I actually tricked you into making enough dough for 2 pie crusts. You can always use this for any other pie type recipes. For all the work that you're doing, it's always nice to have a second pie crust. Just keep it in the freezer. I shape 1/2 into a round disc and wrap it up with parchment paper. Crumpling the paper beforehand helps to mold it around the dough better. I then put it in the fridge to chill for at least 20 minutes. Do the same for the leftover dough, and it can go in a Ziploc to be forgotten in the freezer forever. Okay, I lied. I passed out and the dough has been resting overnight for a total of 21 hours. After 20 minutes, or in my case 21 hours, take it out to thaw, and also prepare a small dish of white substance. Sprinkle, sprinkle. Place the pie disc on your working surface and let it get closer to room temperature. This way, hopefully when you roll it out, it won't crack as easily. When the dough is more thawed, sprinkle some flour on top to prevent the rolling pin from sticking. Hit the dough with the rolling pin like your name is Chris Brown. This method is called twecking. It's a real thing, I swear. It's a method that incorporates less heat to the dough rather than rolling right away. Roll the dough out into a round sheet. Mine is totally not round at all. The dough is cracked because I'm impatient and I don't take my own advice. The dough was definitely still too cold when I started rolling it out. To fix this, tear some excess dough from the sides and patch the cracks. I got my dough about 14-15 inches wide for my 10-inch skillet. Then I grease up my cast iron with butter because I don't trust it to be non-stick. Carefully transfer the pie dough over by rolling it onto the rolling pin and then rolling it onto the pan. Well, that totally worked out better than I thought, and I was very proud. Gently ease the crust into the cast iron until it has deep-seated issues and need therapy, just like me. Then smooth out the folded areas and cut off the excess overhang. Not all of it, just a little bit so that we can do a nice little rim job. Taking the parchment paper we used to wrap the dough earlier, I fold it into a quarter, then in half, then round off the excess end with scissors, and then make some cuts on the end like this. With the clean side of the parchment facing us, unfold it and sit it on top of the pie crust. Put the pie crust in the freezer to chill for at least 20 minutes again. I know, it's super annoying, but it'll be worth it to prevent shrinkage when we blind bake it later. In the meantime, let's prepare ingredients for the filling. The first ingredient is potato, because that's what these fruit chunks look like. I'm using Yukon Gold, but any kind that doesn't dissolve easily is okay. I peel 2 of them and chop them into roughly equal sized cubes. Then preheat your oven to 420 Fahrenheit or 215 Celsius on convection setting. We're gonna be baking these to get rid of moisture. Adding raw ingredients with high water content to a quiche is always a really bad idea. We don't want the moisture to mess with the crust. Usually for baked potato, I would use a variety of seasonings. But the goal here is just to cook them to use in the quiche so we don't really have to go overboard. I seasoned mine with just a little bit of oil, salt, and onion powder. On a parchment paper large tray, spread them 5 feet apart because you're not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with being gay, please don't cancel me. I then transfer the potatoes to the middle rack of the oven and bake for 15 minutes. When the time is up, I take them out and stir them to put them back in for another 12 to 15 minutes. Take them out when they're nicely browned to cool. Now, we're gonna blind bake the pie crust. Grab the cast iron pie crust from the freezer and start preheating the oven to a fury 425 Fahrenheit or 220 Celsius. Grab some aluminium foil to make a bowl. The pie crust is now firm enough from freezing to not be ripped up by the sharp edges of the aluminium foil. Fill it with pie weights, dry beans, or rice. I'm using lentils because it's cheap and I can store them to reuse or turn them into delicious soup later. Pop this into the oven on the middle rack to bake for 20 minutes. While the crust is baking, we need to grab ingredients for the liquid part of the quiche. Ew! Let the heavy cream and eggs sit around and come to room temperature. You don't necessarily have to add cheese to quiches, but cheese good, me like. Typically, use shredded blocks of Gruyere or Swiss cheese. My partner went grocery shopping, so I told him to get me either kind. But I made the mistake of not specifying the cut, and he got me sliced deli cheese. So yeah, I'll be a guinea pig here and try it out to see if it works. Use shredded cheese, or in my case, chop these slices up into tiny pieces. Oh, looks like my pie crust is done. Take out the beans, foil, and parchment paper. Poke the bottom with a fork to allow steam to escape, then put it back in the oven for another 5 minutes or so that the bottom can dry out. It came out pretty decent, but then a tragic accident happened. My dumbass dropped my phone onto the pie crust. Oh well, it's still yummy. To a mixing bowl, at your room temperature, 400 ml of whipping cream, 6 whole eggs, and a dash of pepper and salt. I also added 1 teaspoon of dashi stock powder dissolved in a tiny bit of hot water. This is inspired by the scorpion broth Senshi uses. Beat with a fork, but just enough to break up the eggs. Make sure not to overbeat it or you get a very spongy egg texture in the quiche. I added my potatoes directly to the egg mixture, but the smarter thing to do would have been to add it to the base of the crust, then pour the egg mixture over the potato and crust. Here, I kinda got a little bit distracted and left the liquid sitting in the crust for too long without being baked. This results in the crust absorbing some of the egg and gradually becoming soggy. So don't be like me and quickly move it to the oven if you can. Bake for 35 minutes or until the center is just jiggly. Then let it cool for a second before you start garnishing. Put on your different colored cherry tomatoes, and in place of the orange fruit, we're using dried apricots. Look at it, it's so pretty. As I'm sprinkling the top with some cheese, I noticed that there's not much jiggle to my quiche. I'm stressing a bit over whether or not I'll end up over baking. But I'm pretty sure it's not done yet since this is a really large quiche. So all we can do is trust the process. To prevent the toppings from browning, I put some foil on the top. Then I bake at a low 300 Fahrenheit for another 30 minutes. Quiches are really hard because there's no good way to check if it's done or not. All I can do is be patient, and after 30 minutes, I took the quiche out and it looks pretty good. But you never know, so I'm not gonna push my luck. Control your compulsive urge to cut into the quiche and let it cool to room temperature, refrigerating overnight. At this point, just hope that we got God and anime on our side. It's the third day now. The quiche has been resting in the fridge, so now I get it out and we're ready to cut into it. Moment of truth. My bottom crust is so soft, it's really hard to take it out cleanly. See what I said about leaving the liquid sitting in the crust at room temperature for too long? Otherwise, the custard looks like it actually cooked through and is set. Be careful moving it here. Fuck. Once you plate it, you can eat this cold, but I'm not a psycho, so I'm actually gonna heat it up for 20 minutes on 350 Fahrenheit covered. In the meantime, I'll make some tea. I'm happy I get to use my vintage teacup that I totally did not plunder from dead people at an estate sale. And there you have it, the Man Eating Plant Tart. Time to enjoy the man-eating fruits of my labor. This is actually surprisingly good. The custard gives a creamy mouthfeel, and the potatoes almost act as like a replacement for bacon. Adds like greasy and savoriness, and it's actually pretty good. Huh, pleasantly surprised. I was ready to say don't make this, but it's actually pretty good. With that said, I think the Man Eating Plant Tart from Delicious in Dungeon was a success. If you're interested in another Delicious in Dungeon recipe, go check out these other videos. Until then, bye!